Hello, my name is Scott Parker, and welcome to episode 6 of The Road to the Empire Strikes Back. This one is all about the music. Now, if you're like me and everyone else who saw Star Wars back in 1977, you know that an integral part of the film experience was John Williams' music, the score. I loved it. Nowadays, there's those 10 albums in 10 days thing on Facebook that influenced you. The soundtrack to Star Wars definitely interested me. And I still actually have my original copy and the second copy that I had because I burned through the first copy pretty heavily. So from 1977 to 1980, I listened to the music of Star Wars over and over and over again. Close Encounters, yes. Superman, yes. Did not have Jaws. Didn't see it till I was older, so I did not have the soundtrack back then. But I loved the Star Wars soundtrack. It is the album that got me into instrumental orchestra music. It wasn't Beethoven, wasn't Mozart, it wasn't Bach. It was John Williams' music to Star Wars. I knew that movie inside and out, and I could listen to the soundtrack and I could see the movie in my head. And of course, what's great about the original soundtrack is you get the write-up, which was fantastic. You would actually get the liner notes where it explains what's happening in the music. And it, for a young 8-year-old like me, stepping his toe into music that was not Disney music, it was a big deal. So Star Wars music has always been important to me. So naturally, when it came time to reviewing the Empire Strikes Back soundtrack, I wanted to do it, of course. That's an obvious episode. Now, the record came out before the movie, but here in 2020, as we were looking back 40 years, I hadn't seen the movie in a long time. If you watch episode 5, you will see my review of me watching the movie for the very first time in I don't know how many years. I know the movie inside and out. But I didn't want to listen to the soundtrack until after I had seen the movie because, again, if you're like me, if you listen to this music, you see it in your head. That's how good John Williams' music is. Now, when it came time to thinking about doing the soundtrack, I have multiple ways to do it. There is this way. I know you probably can't see that, but this was the box set that came out in 90, 91, 95, I'm not sure when it was. It had 4 discs, and it had Star Wars Empire, Jedi, and then it had a 4th disc of extra music that wasn't on the original soundtrack. Now, why they didn't sequence the music in order, who knows? Who knows? We don't ask those kind of questions. But when you have the actual box set, this is probably the definitive collection of The Empire Strikes Back and Jedi and Star Wars because it comes through in movie order. It's 2 discs long, and just about every cut and cue is in this film. Of the film is in the soundtrack. So if you're going to get one and you want to be a completist, this is probably the one to get. But today we are talking about the original 1980 version of the Empire Strikes Back theme music. Now, unlike my Star Wars records over here, for some reason the actual records have been lost to time. I don't know how that happened, but it is what it is. But as you can see, it's been stored in a box that actually bent the cardboard binding. But let's talk about the cover. Is that not one of the best looking things? It's actually from the trailer, the very first trailer where it ended with Vader's breathing and that kind of thing. So it was great to have this on side 1. And on side 2, arguably the best of the 3 original posters. The Star Wars one was very good, but you didn't have the characters that didn't look like Mark Hamill and Princess Leia. And the Jedi one had just the hand, and I can't remember off the top of my head what the Jedi poster, the official one, looked like this, but this piece of artwork is maybe one of the most iconic paintings of the Star Wars era. So right off the bat, you get awesome cover, awesome back cover, and for any fan especially a young 11-year-old fan, you've got the inside. You got the inside pictures. Now, unlike Star Wars, which gave you what, like 12 pictures, you get pages and pages of pictures that you can just literally pour over. You get our heroes and villain on the opening segment, and then you get pictures of the AT-ATs and the probe droid and Han and Leia and the ship and Dagobah, and there's Yoda. And of course, what's really neat about the Boba Fett one is that you can see all of the damage on his thing. So anyway, and of course, just like the Star Wars one, you actually had the liner notes that described what's happening in the music, and you had an interview by a guy named Alan Arnold, who probably wrote the liner notes. I probably should have looked that up, but it doesn't matter. But it's really neat to read what John Williams thought at the time, and to read these liner notes as they were in 1980. But this is just the package. What's in the package? That's what we're talking about today. And I put the music on my phone, and I actually still have the CD version. Oh yeah, I forgot. I actually bought the 2-disc CD version back in the day before the other soundtracks came out. So I actually had multiple versions of the Empire Strikes Back soundtrack. And back before 1989, when John Williams came to the Houston Symphony Orchestra and conducted some of his music, we got to meet him. And at that point, this was before Last Crusade, which is among my top 5 favorite John Williams soundtracks of all time, I was able to tell him my favorite soundtrack. You're looking at it right here. Star Wars and Empire are just about like this. They're so intertwined in my early development. Jedi, not so much. Jedi had some good music, the Luke and Leia theme. But Jedi had a lot of, shall we say, music that's been redone. And it was only a single disc, too. This had double disc back in the day. And double CD, too. But the music of The Empire Strikes Back, that's just, it is fantastic. And you've been hearing the theme now. And, of course, what's interesting about when you're in 1980 and you've been listening to the Star Wars soundtrack for 3 years, you know that the opening track is like the Star Wars March. It has the opening theme, and right before the music that accompanies the blockade runner shooting everything, it jumps to the like the concert version of the Star Wars March. So this is Empire is the first time you get to hear what it's like to have the main theme and the scroll music, and then have something else. And it's always been fun in all these 9 movies to see how John Williams transitions from the traditional Star Wars theme to the opening scene of whatever movie he is scoring for. And I've always loved the Empire one, because especially with the original, you have the sound that goes to the probe droid being shot out from the Star Destroyer. But oddly enough, on the 1980 version of this, it goes from the main theme to the music to where Han Solo is flying out of the space slug. As we'll get into as we go forward on this review, I'm not sure who had a hand in sequencing the music and sequencing the order of the music for this soundtrack, because frankly, it's not in any order, and it just it jumps around. And as I was listening to it yesterday on my iPod, I was like, I was startled by some of the jolts, because I'm so used to the 2-disc version. When I listen to the soundtrack, this is the version I listen to all the way through, beginning to end, and you get to have everything. So it's wonderful to have that disc collection. So it's a little jarring to go back and forth, but 4 sides, 2 records. Side 1, main theme. We get that. You know what that sounds like. Track 2, Yoda's theme. We didn't know who Yoda was back in 1980. Frankly, we still don't know a whole lot about Yoda 40 years later. But John Williams captured in his theme for Yoda the magnificence and the mysteriousness and the elegance and the etherealness of the Force in the one theme. It's gorgeous, it's light, and it's so perfectly sums up who Yoda actually is. And then funny, so back in the day, my mom had a church organ in our house. It was a smaller piece, not like a piano, but it had two racks of keyboards. And of all the music that I tried to listen and piece out, Yoda's theme was one of the two pieces of music that I tried to figure out what was going on. I think you can guess the second. I got Yoda's music playing right here, and it's just, for such a bombastic opening theme, and of course the bombastic Vader's March theme, which we'll get to in a second, to have Yoda's theme be like Leia's theme, which was strings and woodwinds and French horns, it made it all the more magical. It is one of my favorite pieces of music John Williams has ever composed. It is so wonderful. Track 3 on side 1 is called Training of a Jedi Knight. It's playful and it's still light. And again, 4 tracks on side 1, 2 of which are Yoda stuff and training stuff. You go back to, now that we've seen what it's like to have Jedis in training because of the prequels, it is fascinating to think back to 1980 when you have the Dagobah scenes with Luke just like running through the bog and climbing up vines and lifting rocks and that kind of thing. And this kind of music is just, it's playful, fun, and light. And again, it just goes back to the impish nature of Yoda himself as he's presented in Empire Strikes Back, which I think we could all agree, well, maybe we can't. I think it's one of the best representations of Yoda in all the movies that we've had since. Side 4 ends with a track called The Heroics of Han and Luke and Han. Now, it starts off with the music that accompanies Luke hanging upside down in the Wampa's ice cave. And, it was only in the rewatch that I realized, how'd the Wampa do that? Did he breathe on the top and then melt Luke's legs? We don't care. All we care about is the fact that Luke had a problem to get out of, and he needed his lightsaber to do it. And again, in listening to this music again, you have this, you can tell in the music when Luke says, I have to use the Force. And the flute itself is the signifying instrument that transitions from Luke going, I can't get out of this, to I can use the Force to help me get out of it. And what's great about Williams' music and just about everything he does is that, again, you listen to this piece of music, you can see the movie in your head. You know exactly when the sword picks up in his hand. And it's, again, a great piece of music. You're going to hear that over and over again with this. The Han part goes back to Han getting 3PO and Leia out of the Rebel base with Vader coming into the ice base. I am reading my notes. I have my notes here on my iPad that I made while I was listening to this again. And again, what's great about this piece is the medium to low brass that really carry the latter half of the piece. And when Vader, exactly when Vader's on screen because his theme comes through. Well, speaking of Vader's theme, let's go ahead and switch let's flip the record. Side 2, track 1 is one of the most famous pieces of music John Williams has ever composed. The Imperial March, which is also Darth Vader's theme. In the movie, as I mentioned on episode 5, I love the line where Han goes, "It's a good bet the Empire knows we're here." And General Riken says, "We'd better start the evacuation." And then you get a downbeat of this massive piece of music. It's the first time you hear this piece of music on screen. You see the Imperial fleet, and then you see Vader just watching over everything. It is a piece of music that I have put on playlists for 40 years. It is that good. In fact, when I was making my playlist for my son, when he was just like 5 years old, I put various pieces of Star Wars music on there. I put Yoda's theme, and I put the Imperial March, because those two things, back to back, they're really remarkable pieces of music. Ironically, the other 3 things that I put on there were the main themes from the prequels. I put the Duel of the Fates with the dialogue, which I love. I love that piece of music. And then Across the Stars, and then Battle of the Heroes. And then Leia's theme. I did Leia's theme as well. But again, Vader's March is fantastic. And I mean, I will still conduct this. The counter melody at the end, with a brass take it to the higher octave. It is a stellar piece of music. The departure of Boba Fett. Again, that's where the ones that some dude just ran past my house. Anyway, it's the music that accompanies Boba Fett taking away Han's body and from Cloud City. And again, it's good. It's a good. John Williams does a lot of action music very well, and especially with the piano when it comes through, when it shifts to the scenes with Luke, and you can tell from the low piano that things are about to be in trouble. And it ends with Luke showing up in the carbon freezing chamber, which again is one of those great moments in all 10 Star Wars movies, which is "The Force is with you, young Skywalker, but you are not a Jedi yet." And he delivers those lines with no music. It's fantastic. Han Solo and the Princess. It's our first love theme. You get the second love theme with Across the Stars in Attack of the Clones. This is, if John Williams is pulling from opera and the leitmotifs, then with this piece of music he is pulling from the 1930s, 40s, and 50s soundtracks of old. This is a gorgeous piece of music that never quite is happy. If you listen to this, it's constantly mournful. It's mournful in the way that Princess Leia's theme was mournful from the first soundtrack. The Leia's theme, I could probably do a whole piece on that. Leia's theme is one of my favorite pieces of music in Star Wars canon, because at that point you didn't know that she was his sister, and all you knew that she was a single person standing against Darth Vader and the entire Empire. And that piece of music signifies her struggle, her bravery on her own. The Han and Leia love theme have that. It has that composure to it, to where it is never quite happy, because their love, at least in this movie, is doomed for separation and pain and heartbreak and loss. And it's just, again, a wonderful piece of music. And as you can tell, the music, when the Vader's ship leaves the asteroid field, Williams brings in the xylophones. It's one of those little flourishes that speak to the type of soundtrack and the type of, when he's got the entire orchestra at his disposal to bring forth the music, the movies, and to complement the movies. It is just it's like an artist painting with a almost limitless palette. Hyperspace music, again, it's pretty straightforward. It is exciting. It's fast. It's thrilling, and I love how you've got the internal struggle of Luke done instrumentally. How he's coming to realize that, looking back now in Empire, Vader's his father, and there's no denying it, because he says Luke, and he says father, and he says son, and that's it. And you can tell in the music when those things happen. Side two ends with, again, one of my favorite pieces of music that John Williams has ever done. It's called "The Battle in the Snow," and it is the music that accompanies the Hoth battle. Now, it starts with the low piano, and then the cymbals and the percussion kick in, and then the xylophone kicks in. And then when you start to get the actual battle part, the music, the instruments are doing this chaotic thing that, of course, works in a concert format, but it conveys the cacophony, the battle, the complexity, the ambiguity, the defeat of the rebels. In fact, there's this one part that's literally a measure long, where it tells me the rebels are doomed to failure. They're going to lose. And this is the piece of music that if I could ever hear this live, I would just be grinning from ear to ear, because it's one of the best action pieces of music that Williams has done on the entire Star Wars canon. All nine films. That's right, because he didn't do the other two, did he? Yeah, all 9 films. And again, this is one of the pieces of music where I said, I can't listen to this until after I've seen the film, because I can see the film in my head right now as it's playing. We bring out the second record. Side 3 begins with the asteroid field. And of course, this, Han, Leia, Chewie, and 3PO are being chased by the Empire. And that's good. It's good, fast movie music. And it's the frantic nature of the piece, it conveys exactly what it's supposed to convey. Track 2 of Side 3 is called The City in the Clouds. And again, the single French horn here echoes Leia's theme from the first movie, and you get to switch to Fett, trailing the Falcon. This would be the scene that accompanies the trash, the Star Destroyer is letting the trash out. And then you get to when they see Cloud City for the first time, and this is the first time you get to see human voices coming into the Star Wars mix. You'll hear it to great effect with Duel of the Fates from Phantom Menace, but here it's this ethereal otherworldliness. It's almost like I don't know if this is in the liner notes or if I'm coming up with this on my own, but it's like the siren call that used to call sailors back in the day. It's a little bit of that mystique to it, and it's fantastic. Rebels at Bay is track 3 of Side 2, and again it's the second half of the Rebel attack on Hoth, the Imperial attack on Hoth, and this is the music that accompanies Luke taking down the AT-AT. And so, that you can tell exactly where that is. And Side 4 rounds out with Yoda and the tree. Yoda and the Force. Yoda and the tree. That's on Side 4. Yoda and the Force. And again, we didn't know much about the Force in 1980. We knew what Obi-Wan said, and we knew what it could do, which was help Luke get the torpedoes in the shaft, and help him block 2 lasers. And of course, now we get to see us getting a sword at the beginning of the film. Yoda is the first person who tells us what the Force is, how it works, and the music that accompanies this monologue by Yoda, again, echoes Yoda's theme in the softness and the smallness of the piece of music. But this is the part of the movie where Luke tries and fails to lift the X-Wing on his own. It's too heavy, he says. And then Yoda, in this beautiful, gentle, swelling piece of music, you see the power of the Force. And again, what John Williams can convey through music is just simply genius. It's one of the pieces of music that often gets excerpted. So again, it's in Side 4, and I don't remember. I know that the Star Wars soundtrack, you actually had Side 1 and 4 on a single disc, and you had 2 and 3 on a single disc. So you could actually play 1 and 2. Remember those days when you actually had the thing that hung, and the first record would fall and it'd play all the way through, and then the needle would come back, and then the second record would fall right on top of it, scratching it up. But we didn't care. We didn't know. I can't remember if Empire was made like that or not. But Side 4 starts off with a piece called The Duel. Now, again, it's a recurring theme here. One of my favorite all-time pieces of Star Wars music. And it comes down to a single moment. Then that single moment is when R2 opens the door. The duel opens in one of those great scenes where Luke is in front of the big giant round window, and Vader's just throwing stuff at him, and it breaks, and Luke gets sucked out, and he barely hangs on to the gantry before he was able to have to fight Vader again. Excuse me. But it instantly shifts to the fast movie music that accompanies Lando and hang on, I messed up here. It plays Lando and Leia and Chewie and 3PO are trying to escape. Trying to escape because they've already lost Han. And again, the piece of music, the cymbal crash, the Goosebumps nearly every time you hear it. I hear it. Again, I love this piece of music. It reminds me of the chasm swing. So when you listen to the chasm swing from Star Wars, you know exactly when Luke leaps off and swings across. That's what happens here with this piece of music. It is, again, one of my favorite pieces of music. Side 4, track 2 is called The Magic Tree. That's the failure of Luke when he goes into the cave and sees the effigy of Darth Vader. This is the first time that synthesizer is used in a Star Wars soundtrack, and it gets that nice otherworldly feel when you look at things that is clearly a projection by the dark side, and Luke fails. I've often wondered, I probably brought this up in the movie, but the scene goes with later Luke says, "What's in there?" And Yoda says, "Only what you take in with you." And Luke goes, "Well, I'm taking my gun and my lightsaber in with me." And he draws first. I've often wondered what was supposed to happen. What was Luke supposed to do? Was he supposed to go in weaponless and just use the Force? That seems to be the implication, because after Luke fails, Yoda just shakes his head and goes, "Well, there we go. Another loss." But Lando's Palace is the second to last track of the entire soundtrack. And it's got that really interesting. It's the music that accompanies when Lando and our four heroes when they're walking through Cloud City. And in listening to it now as a 51-year-old, it has like an almost World's Fair vibe. Whether it's the 1939 World's Fair or maybe the 1964 World's Fair, it's got that fun, peppy, optimistic, futuristic city vibe. It's almost like, even though this was supposed to be a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, it's like this is what the cities of the future would be like, the optimistic vision of just a city floating in the clouds. And of course, it's ominous, and I was waiting for the cue to where Lando opens the door, and I realized it's not in the original soundtrack, it's in the extended version of the soundtrack. So, because it just kind of fades away, and you're like, wait, is that the end? Yeah, it is the end. Which brings us to the finale. And the finale, of course, is where Luke and Leia and 3PO and R2 are on the ship, and Lando and Chewie take off to go after Han and Tatooine. And again, like so many of these pieces of music on this soundtrack, when it comes to the hero side, mournful. I don't think I cognitively recognized how mournful all this music was back when I was 11. But now that I'm 51, I know exactly what I'm listening for, and I can hear it in each and every cut and cue that John Williams has written. The Empire is as good a soundtrack as it is. It's mournful, it's longing, it knows it's a second act, it knows it's going to lose, and the music comes through with that. I mean, I felt that as a kid, even though if I didn't know it. So that's what the Empire soundtrack, as it was in 1980, comes across. I wore these records out big time. In fact, probably the reason why I don't have them, I mean, I still have the sleeves, is I think that I wore them out so bad that they were, that they were unplayable. My original Star Wars one is also unplayable. It's got scratches and stuff like that. But when you give an 8-year-old or a 9-year-old or a 10-year-old a record that he loves a lot and just wants to hear the same music over and over again, it's going to get scratched. It just is, because he's 8. And even though I was 11 at the time, who knows? But anyway, that is the Empire Strikes Back soundtrack. I want to touch quickly on some of the cuts from the 2-disc version. You basically it goes from you actually get the fanfare on this one, and it goes all the way out to the finale at the end. And you get, a few cuts that actually are brand new, and then you get extended versions of songs that were on this soundtrack. But the key thing to this, though, it is sequenced in order, and it makes such a difference. Well, it's mostly in order. It's not completely in order, but it is mostly in order. And you get a lot of liner notes in this book too. I forgot who did the liner notes on this one. Who knows? You probably have one of your own. Anyway, I would love to hear your thoughts on the Empire Strikes Back soundtrack. What is it your favorite record? Is it your favorite soundtrack? Is it your favorite John Williams soundtrack? Is it your favorite Star Wars soundtrack? What's some of your favorite cuts on this record? Like, comment, share the videos if you have any other musical friends out there. This has gotten to me excited. I almost want to do the other two soundtracks from back in the day. I don't know their newer ones as well as I do the older ones. But anyway, thank you very much for watching. This is now at a half an hour, so I don't know about you, but when it comes to content that I like to listen to, the more the merrier. I'm not trying to talk just to talk, but I just, had enough content that I wanted to keep going, and I could probably keep going even farther if I had a chance to listen and talk and do kind of a Mystery Science Theater thing with it. But I'm not going to do that because it's like over an hour long. So thank you very much for watching. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you for liking and commenting. And as always, come back for episode 7, and may the Force be with you. Goodbye.